I am Teresa Bolton. I am the owner and founder of Customized Recruitment. I've been a recruiter for 17, 18 years now, and one of the areas that we specialize in is nonprofit. I'm excited to be here today and talk about burnout in nonprofit because this is something that we hear a lot about. I'm happy to be here with my business partner, Derek Rollstone.
Greetings from Winnipeg. Thanks, Teresa. Very happy to be talking to our friends at Global Philanthropic. It's hard to believe, but I've been in human resource management for 32 years. I've got a company called Stone HR Strategies. We work with organizations that don't have human resource functions, and a lot of those are nonprofits. We love working with nonprofits, and we're here today to help you talk about an important topic.
One of the things we hear a lot about when we're recruiting with nonprofits is that burnout factor. Leaders of nonprofits coming to us saying, we need to fill this position. And as we're talking through it, a lot of times it's not just a plug and play. There's a bigger picture that needs to be addressed. And a lot of times it just is a fact that they need more staff, a relocation of resources, or something just needs to give. When Francois asked us to participate in this podcast, I spent a lot of time listening to two podcasts and some TED Talks and stuff like that, particularly in nonprofit, and was really surprised at some of the statistics that we saw. 58% of nonprofit employees experience some sort of burnout on a regular basis. 71% of nonprofit leaders experience burnout. 1 in 5 nonprofit employees are considering leaving their job and citing 41% as burnout, and 50% of nonprofits find it difficult to fill employee vacancies. There's the statistical data to really support this topic.
Those numbers, wow, they really underscore what the issue is. Do you think is it a function of the people that work in nonprofit or the type of work that they're doing, do you figure?
That's a great question, and I think it's a little bit of both because most nonprofit has a big human element to it. So there is that stress of working these members, these clients, they're people in need, and then it's nonprofit. So it's about doing more with less. Nonprofit work really appeals to people that are empaths and people that are passionate for the cause. And so they're not able to sometimes really differentiate between, hey, this is just a job and it's a means to an end, it's a way to support my family. But now this is mission driven. So you have that pressure to really perform because it is something that you feel so passionately about, that you care so deeply about.
No, I hear you. You used the word passion a couple of times. And it's like there's a blurred boundary on, especially in some, maybe not all, but some nonprofit work. There's a blurred boundary between passion and overwork, right? Like the two of them go together. What do you think?
Exactly. And I think that that's something that we really need to identify as it's happening and making that distinction between, is this being overworked or is this being driven from passion? And so recognizing the signs of burnout, I think, is really important. Derek, what are some of the signs of burnout that you see when you're talking to clients that are using that term, and how do they describe it?
Well, if you think about the idea of human giver syndrome, if some of the people watching have said some things like, hey, I shouldn't take a break, they start to feel guilty, I can't take a break, or when they start to feel selfish if they're saying no, or when they start to think, oh, others have it way worse than me, I need to kind of soldier on. That's the kind of stuff that really can lead to burnout. And I'd say when I think about work that Stone HR Strategies has done with nonprofits, we work with sport organizations, we work with religious organizations, we work with arts organizations, which they can have exposure to it for sure, to overwork and to human giver syndrome. But I also especially think about some organizations where they are really dealing with trauma and crises. and that can really add more so than maybe a sport organization to the burnout. What do you think?
I completely agree. Going back to your question regarding that, you've got these two pressures. One is dealing with trauma, if you know, in healthcare, for example, and then the other is the whole doing more with less because it is nonprofit, there's less resources, there's less funds available. It's something that I think people in nonprofit have to be very aware of, especially the leaders. It's up to the leaders to recognize that both in themselves as well as in their staff, and to protect their staff from burnout. I think, in my opinion, a leader in a nonprofit, their biggest responsibility shouldn't be just the financial reviews. It should be protecting the people behind the mission. Having these oh, sorry, you were going to say something, Derek?
They have to model the behavior, the idea, either what if it's coming from the top. Leaders need to take time off. Leaders
Yep.
need to take vacation. I don't want to talk about solutions just yet. While we're still talking about what the issue is, but people need to take time off. They need to take
Yeah.
vacation. Leaders do, and employees do too. And they don't or shouldn't feel guilt about it. It's okay, right? People, there's a reason that we get vacation, and it's to recharge batteries. And the place isn't going to fall apart without you.
I know, isn't that true, right? And you bring up a good point too. Something that I learned in a TED talk that I was listening to is that recovery isn't just resting. Recovery also is recharging. And this doesn't happen by just laying on the couch. Recovery is connecting with things that help to recharge you. When you're still mentally attached to work, you're not present. And that is the trick to avoiding burnout, is to be able to, in your off time, is to be present. You don't get paid for working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So don't do that to your brain. You need to detach from work outside of your work hours, and you're going to become a better, more productive employee.
For sure. What are the signs, or what are some of the signs that people that are showing evidence of burnout? They're not at their best. They're not doing great work, right?
Yep.
How can you start to see, how can leaders see this of others, or how can they see it in themselves?
That's a really great question, because I think sometimes burnout gets confused with bad behavior or performance issues. So emotional signs will be irritability, emotional exhaustion, cynicism, feelings of detachment or numb, being on autopilot. Physical signs can include chronic fatigue, sleep issues, headaches, increased illness. Now all of a sudden you've got an absentee issue, and it's not due to somebody that doesn't care. It's often due to somebody that cares too much. Signs in the workplace include reduced productivity, increased conflict, the quiet quitting. That's a new term that's come around since COVID, so that checking out. Leadership signs: decision fatigue, micromanaging, emotional reactivity, and withdrawing from teams.
You raise a good point when you talk about absenteeism, or you talk about quiet quitting, and there's another word that I use in my practice: presenteeism. Right? The people, they're present in body but not completely in mind. And that's not great for the organizations that these folks represent, right?
Oh, it's not.
Let's identify it, and let's talk about ways that we might be able to fix it.
Some of the things are, to your point, is taking vacation and doing so without guilt, encouraging those breaks. So those breaks aren't scrolling through social media. Those breaks are detaching from work and maybe leaving the workplace and going for lunch and not talking about work and not thinking about work. Another one is saying no when capacity is exceeded. And that is a tough one, because then we get into this questioning our commitment and feeling guilty about it, and maybe not being a team player. But sometimes the power of saying no is exactly that. It has a lot of power. And then leaders go, something needs to be fixed. Do we need more people? Do we need to cut back on programming? Something just isn't working here. And so from a recruitment perspective, I deal with leaders, and when it comes to filling jobs, I want to know what's going on. If you simply replace this human resources person, is that going to have an overall effect on being on the verge of burnout, or is this something bigger? Does this mean that you need to replace the human resources person, but also do you need to get rid of some of, or not get rid of, but reassign some of your duties as the CEO, the leader, president, executive director of this nonprofit? And are there people on your leadership team that can take these over, or do you need to hire a second in command? That's something that you would talk about a lot too in organizational structure. And so what kind of things do you see, Derek?
Well, you said a lot there. I want to focus on what you were just saying towards the end. When leaders look at this and look at burnout and look, how can leaders fix this? Well, we're talking about some ideas already, and people need to take vacation, people need to take time off. You mentioned lunch a minute ago. I don't work for a nonprofit, but I have a policy. I don't eat lunch at my desk ever, right? That's something that people need to consider. But when you talk about affecting people's performance and reduced productivity and presenteeism and just people not performing, leaders need to fix that. And that might be through performance, what I call performance conversation or performance review or performance improvement plans, which we could have a whole separate conversation on. But that's what it might lead to, right? If people need to fix this stuff, they either need to get help getting it fixed, which we're going to talk about, or they need to fix it themselves. I guess the last thing I would add at the very beginning of your last comment, and my daughter's put together a book for me of 50 things that dad says all the time. And like in the top 5 is no is a complete sentence, right? I've been saying that to them since they were little. Now, the answer is no. And employees that work in nonprofit need to be able to say no. No, I can't do that. Or no, I can't do that right now. And here's why, but I'm going to do it. So these are some of the things I think about when I think about burnout and nonprofits.
And then the leaders sometimes need to say no to their boards. If their boards are operating at a level that is more operational and less governance, being able to push back and say, that's a great idea, but we're just not going to be able to do that this year. We don't have the funding for it. I think the other thing we need to do too is start talking about it more. So normalizing conversations about mental health and talking openly about stress and well-being in the workplace, including those wellness checks before it gets to that point of having to put somebody on a PIP plan, is preventing that and recognizing the signs of burnout so that it doesn't get to that. Simple questions: how is your workload feeling? What support do you need? What's feeling unstable right now? Because it shouldn't be a surprise at a performance review.
100%, no surprises. What else do you think leaders can do to help reduce or at least recognize the signs of burnout?
I think in addition to some of the things that we mentioned and the conversations is asking the right questions too. There's two things: is recognizing burnout in yourself and as a leader, and recognizing burnout in your staff and protecting the organization from that. You can't meditate people out of a systemic burnout, right? So a yoga class isn't going to fix it. Maybe that is a matter of looking at the overall organization, the responsibilities, and deciding, you know what, we need to use some of this funding to invest in hiring more people rather than creating more programs. And we'll get there, but we just can't deliver the results based on the resources that we have in terms of the people being available to do it. And what you don't want to happen is somebody joins a nonprofit because of their commitment, passion, and compassion for the cause, and then they become burnt out and jaded, and they lose that because there's nothing left. The other thing I think too is in nonprofit, statistically, there's more females than males, and I think females are not very good at self-care and not very good at saying no. I think those are things that we have to protect ourselves from ourselves.
Can you raise a good point when you think about gender in the workplace and think about people's level of busyness. Could nonprofits help reduce burnout by altering or having a bit more flexible schedules?
Yes.
Or can you have, like, do people need to be there from 8:30 to 4:30? Could they be there from 7:30 to 3:30? And think about core hours of the and we can talk about working from home. I mean, that's a whole other topic too, but I think about the hours of work and commutes and how that could reduce burnout for people.
I think that's a great point. I'm a big fan of hybrid roles. I think there's a lot of great things that come from people working together in the same office and environment. But I also think that there's a lot of benefits that come from having that flexibility to work from home too. So if it's possible, coming up with hybrids or reduced work weeks or having mental health days, things like that that can offset some of the demands of the work. We can't give you more money, or we can't give you more vacation, but what we can do is offer you a hybrid. You're working 2 days from home, or you know what, everybody has been working really hard for this conference that we put on. Everyone take Friday afternoon off. Just check your emails and phones for any emergencies. I think having some flexibility on that.
Do you think you need to have some policy, not policies, but you need to have some practices with regards to email, right? Also, I send you emails sometimes on Sunday morning at 6 o'clock because that's when I'm working on that stuff. But I don't expect that you're going to respond. You don't work for me, but I don't expect that you're going to respond right away. But that's when I'm sending it.
Yeah.
Either having something in the note saying, I've seen people, your hours might not be the same as my hours, and putting it right in the auto signature, or having those conversations with employees so that they understand that I might send you something, but we don't need to talk about this till Monday. What do you think of that kind of clarification?
Or better yet, put a time delay on it. So if you're thinking about it and you feel the need to draft that email, set it up so it doesn't get sent till 8 o'clock on Monday morning.
The other thing, I was just thinking about this like an hour ago. I was actually, Teresa, doing some work with one of your clients here in Manitoba, and we're working on an employee handbook, and we were specifically looking at, coincidentally, vacation time. And at this place, and I'd encourage others to look at it this way too, they don't have vacation carryover. It's not use it or lose it, it's use it, right? And you got to take vacation for reasons that we've talked about already in the last 20 minutes. People do need to recharge. And I always say to companies and employees or organizations, like this is not an ATM. You can't pay out the vacation. We're not paying that out. Take the time off. And whether that means going to Mexico or staying at home and watching Netflix, whatever you got to do, you got to take vacation. You got to take paid vacation.
I agree. And then your personal responsibility in that is to detach and take a break from work. Because if you're sitting at home but you're checking your email every hour, is that really a vacation? Are you going to come back feeling recharged? Because that's the whole point of time off, and that includes weekends as well, and evening. When you talked about signs of burnout and not being present in the workplace, that includes not being present at home, because you're so busy thinking about work, and you get those Sunday sads where you get butterflies in your stomach and not looking forward to going back to work. And so those are signs that something isn't right.
What else do you think people could do to get the help that they need?
Well, I think for leaders, creating that safe environment to be able to talk about, to be able to for employees to admit when they're feeling overwhelmed, where it's safe to set those boundaries, where it's safe to ask for help without fear of judgment, retaliation, or being seen as less committed. Those are some of the things. Healthy organizations are built by healthy people, and mental health is this buzzword, but I think that we're forgetting that mental health is health. If somebody is physically unwell, that's easy to say, oh, they're physically unwell. Of course, they need time off work. But when it comes to mental health, and it's something that can be very preventable in terms of burnout, is that we have to recognize that for what it is, and it's important. Very important.
I hadn't heard you say that before. Healthy organizations are, what is it, built by healthy people? Good. I wrote it down. I love that. When I think about leaders, when I was an HR director at Suncor or Pepsi or Bell back in the day, people would sometimes come to see me about issues that they were having, and I'm probably not the right person for them to come to. I don't have a master's degree in social work or psychology, and I'm just not. And maybe this is some of the stress that leaders get put on. They're not sure how to help the employee when they start to see these signs. And this is why I'm a huge believer in EAP or EFAP, employee family assistance programs. And I bet and they're just underused. Employees might know a little bit about these. For those that are listening, you might have one already and not know about it through your benefits provider. If you don't have it, one of my clients, an insurance company, they just implemented an employee assistance program. This is absolutely the way to go. When someone is having an issue and you see the signs of it, leaders can either mention it, or when the person comes to them and they're clearly having some, marital problems, for example, or possible addiction issues, we can put them in the right direction. I highly recommend for those that are watching us, if you have one, make sure you understand it and make sure there are posters up, or make sure that there are fridge magnets or brochures around, and take advantage. It's not a sign of weakness to seek out help. It's a sign of strength. I highly recommend, and I'm a big fan of, as you can tell, of the EAP. What do you think, Teresa?
I completely agree. I think that they're very underused, and I think that it should be an important part of the onboarding as well. When new employees start, is to explain we also have an EAP program, and this is what's included in it, and here is the number, and everything is completely confidential, and we encourage our employees to use it, because most people think EAP, I don't need a therapist, but it goes so much more than that. It can involve financial counseling, for example. There's a lot of different things that EAP programs offer. And that actually reminded me of something too, is as a leader, it's a good investment to think about getting an executive coach, because it can be pretty lonely when you're leading a nonprofit, because you can't go to the board with certain issues, and you can't go to your employees with certain issues, but you need to have a sounding board, and you need to have a trusted advisor to sometimes help you through some of the things that you're going through it with these big responsibilities that you have in terms of leading a nonprofit. And hiring an executive coach is a resource that I really encourage leaders to look at as well.
I love that idea, and that's the kind of thing that leaders can talk to the board about, or maybe that can be part of
Their compensation.
hiring process. Let me just go back one more minute on the EAP, because you made me think of something else. This is a little known and little used, but it should be used more. So I want to encourage it. You can mandate as a leader, and if you have an employee family assistance program in place, and say you've got Jimmy and he's got clearly like an anger management issue, maybe manifested by a lot of the things that we've been talking about for the last half hour. Leaders can mandate someone to go to EAP. Usually it's, hey, Sally, you might want to check this out. Here's a brochure. You might want to contact them. But you can tell an employee, hey, you're going to see these guys, right? And it's still confidential. I'm not going to hear what you talked about with them, but I am going to hear if you went or not. And managers need to utilize that tool more, in my opinion. Have you heard of that before? It's not used all that much, but it should be.
It should be. And we hear and see it mostly for addiction, but yeah, it can be for so many other resources that an employee may need, depending on what they're going through in their life.
What other ways could well, I've got another idea, and it might seem a bit self-serving, but a lot of nonprofit leaders and employees and leaders are stretched too thin. Well, I think everyone would agree with that. Sometimes you need to get some help, right? There's a reason I don't change the oil on my car. There's a reason you don't cut your own hair, right? Because we need some help. And so sometimes if you need help in hiring, if you need help in HR, we were just talking about an employee handbook. That's the kind of stuff that makes leaders' lives better. And so if you need some help, You need a recruiting company to help you. You need an HR company to help you. That's also a sign of strength. And that's a way to reduce some burnout, is by getting some help outside the organization, an extra set of hands, an extra set of eyes.
And I think sometimes you just get so, how does that saying go? You can't see the forest for the trees, because you're so enveloped in your work that you miss the obvious. Going back to the CEO that I was working with, he was thinking, yes, I need this. And through the conversation, I identified, no, you need help. You need to get some of this stuff off of your plate. How can you redistribute some of your responsibilities? Do you need to hire a COO? Because the leader is the foundation of an organization, just like the foundation on your house. When they're starting to, the integrity is starting to crack, now you've got some problems. How do you fix that before the worst scenario happens? And now your leader is off on stress leave, or your leader has quit, or your leader has just become terrible to deal with because they're so stressed out. And now you've got employee issues.
Don't be a superhero.
Yeah.
Seek out help.
Save yourself from yourself.
Well, Teresa, you've given some great ideas to the listeners. Hopefully that was helpful. Is this kind of what, when you and I wanted to get together to talk about this, is this what you had in mind? Is there anything else that we missed?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I hope that there's some people out there that find this helpful. And like I said, if you can take away just one nugget of information from something that you've attended in terms of a podcast or conference, then it was worth it. I hope our listeners can take away at least one thing.
Thanks for putting this on, Teresa. I always enjoy working with you.
Likewise.